what is define what is precision agriculture, then give some motivation on why we need to do it. The available technologies. Today, I am more focused more on the production and production of the crop. So it's mostly a robotic focus. And then what is available today in the industry, and what we are doing as a company. Here I have some 12, 14 slides. I will should be done in the right time, I guess. Can you all hear me? And can everybody see? Someone can confirm my voice is good.
Yes.
Yeah,
Hear
I'll,
you and also see
yeah.
your slides. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So this is my first slide. The definition of precision agriculture. So primarily, there are three tasks in precision. That one is identifying something of interest, a feature or a characteristic, and locating that object or whatever you're looking at, and then acting on it. But the acting on it, maybe here in agriculture context, it is basically harvesting or pruning or weeding or whatever the task it is, and it can be something else also. I'll just give two examples. But the more important thing is what are you doing it for? It is more primarily to provide for optimum resource for improved efficiency, productivity, quality of the produce, and of course, from a farming community point of view, profitability. Right? There is an organization called International Society for Precision Agriculture. They have a formal definition. I just figured out that there is an organization like that who has a definition. They also add sustainability of agriculture production as one of the goals there. So here, when I sense, basically, we are talking about temporal and spatial. So you have a lot of information to gather, and then you're acting on it. So there is a whole part of cognitive part to it, and uh, so that's about why what is precision agriculture in this definition. I given two examples. One is manual mechanical weeding. It's a very high precision agriculture task because it requires a lot of intelligence and to differentiate what is a weed and not in a weed. If you're a farmer, you probably will find it very difficult to know if it is a very young nursery or a very young plant. It's very difficult to figure out whether it's a paddy or a weed, and only trained eyes and trained skilled laborers knows it. When I started my farming some 14 years back, I couldn't really figure out weed from the paddy, at least in the first few years. Now I am, but it requires a lot of intelligence to know what is a weed. And then you need nimble hands, that's precision, and you have to be fast. So that's really what I classify as a high precision agriculture task. Typically, most tasks done by humans are precision agriculture task. What was still completely still much of the task done by human are still manual. What has been automated is by the tractor, which was what the bull was really doing before. The other example I am showing here is the drip irrigation. Though it may not come into the robotics as a uh, 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 in the in the in the robotic domain, it still is one of the most intelligent tasks done, and it is very mature today. And some of the farms in India and abroad have a good level of automation. Essentially, you're trying to optimize the amount of water and even the fertilizer usage by sensing the content in the soil continuously. You know what is the age of the crop, and you also may get inputs on the health of the crop. And you more likely today's some of the technology use the weather forecast to decide how much water uh, you want to supply, so that you don't get drenched or flooded when there is a rain, if there is a rain, or if you know there is going to be a drought, you maintain that. So there's very highly intelligent solutions now. In fact, there are two companies in Bangalore doing an extremely good job on this, and solves a whole lot of problem. In fact, this afternoon there was a webinar on exactly on drip irrigation on paddy. Paddy, by the way, is one of the crop which guzzles water, 5,000 liters per kg of rice you produce. But then there are companies which have gone ahead and done drip irrigation on paddy, and we use less than 1,000 liters of water for the same thing, and that's an extremely good thing for a country like India. So the other thing on the right side, I put something here called green eggs and ham. I was just looking up the history. That's considered to be one of the earliest high precision GPS solution. This is from a company called Navcom. John Deere was not able to uh, control their uh, tractor to be in a line. It's very, very difficult to find what is a straight line, right? So they want to mechanize it or automate it. So it's not so existing GPS solution. This is in way back in early 90s and late 80s. Existing GPS solution were not able to give precision below a meter at the ground level. So they worked with a company called Navcom, and this is a solution Navcom has built, and now it's part of the Autotrack series of tractors with John Deere. Uh, Today, Navcom has a GPS solution which can be much precise at 5 millimeter, and that solution is used by Autotrack to control the tractor for a line, plowing in a line or seeding in a line or whatever else you use with a tractor. In fact, now Navcom is one of the largest satellite company providing GPS solution, and that's actually part of John Deere, which is one of the largest agriculture appliance company, and we know them more from as a tractor company, but John Deere does a lot more than that. We'll be talking about. So to give a motivation on why do we need precision agriculture, I've taken an example of cotton farming just because I'm a cotton farmer, and but this is true for most of horticulture also. What I've shown here is the task used in farming after the land preparation. You start with seeding and nursery. Then you do weeding, thinning to topping and pruning, scouting, uh, spraying, harvesting, and post-harvest. Right. So seeding is actually a very high precise task. Today, farmers in cotton, we use 2 seed per pit. We actually need only one per seed, and it has to be precisely laid at 3/4 of an inch, and that actually gives a whole lot of yield and uh, health of the seedlings. But it's very, very difficult to do it. But though experienced farm labor can do that. If you can actually do a nursery, that's lot better, because the next task, which is weeding, you need to do weeding because you want to eliminate anything which is not going to help your crop. Weeds are essentially takes away all the nutrients and brings in most pest and disease for crop. So typically, if you don't do a weeding the right time, you not only lose the yield, but you bring in more, you incur more cost because pests and diseases which are weed is a host to, right? Thinning is an operation where I talked about where you actually remove the non-healthy uh, plants and maintain a good plant density or plant count per acre. So typically you put 2 seeds, farmers do put 2 seeds because they are not very sure about the germination and the health of it when they are very as a sapling. So they wait till it goes to some stage and then do what's called a thinning operation, where they go manually remove it. Uh, but if you don't do it, what is happening is you have an unhealthy competition for the plant for all kind of nutrition and sunlight. So thinning is a good operation. If you can do that, you get a good yield. Topping is the stage where you remove the shoot at some point of time and force the plant to get into a reproductive phase. In cotton, we remove it at the 16th or 20th branch level, so that the crop converts forces itself into a reproductive phase. That's where you get the bolls of cotton. Right? If you don't do it, the crop continue grow as a vegetative phase, and the yield necessarily will not be good. And typically I have seen 20-30%, at least 20% yield improvement if I do topping. This is a very standard practice. It's very difficult to follow because it requires a lot of labor to do this. And pruning is typically removing of dead branches and leaves so that you keep the plant healthy and expose it to sunlight and make sure that there's no more pests and diseases become the dead plants, dead leaf and things are more prone to diseases. So we do pruning, especially in fact, in vineyard, we need to do pruning to get a better yield for the next season. If you don't do pruning, it is actually, it is one of the important tasks in a vineyard. Scouting, as you all know, is a normal task every farmer has to do on a daily basis to see what is the health of the plant and to figure out whether there is any deficiency, moisture stress, maybe a disease or pest or something else, so that he can do the right intervention if required. If you don't do the scouting the right time, you need a very good eyes to even do a right assessment of what it is. You may not be able to really figure out what it is. What could be a boron deficiency could be actually a neural viral disease. So it's very difficult to know. So only mostly by practice, scouting becomes better. Spraying is one of the tasks which is most inefficient today. We use spraying for pesticide and herbicide. Today, there are enough data to say that 80% of what you're spraying is actually a waste. Only 20% of it is used. If you can really identify and spray it in a very precise manner and use the right pesticide, you would have saved a lot. In cotton, actually, the pesticide industry, 40% of the pesticide industry's pesticide is used actually in cotton, and we actually know 80% of it is a wasted chemical. So harvesting by far is a very labor intensive task in cotton, mostly primarily done by women and to some extent even by children. There is a lot of child labor in Indian context. Why women? Because we need nimble fingers to do the harvesting, and people have to bend a little bit. Men are not so easy to do that job. Post harvest, I put something here. It would have been a great if you have some uh, solutions to remove the the seed from the cotton. It will be a great help for the farmers, but we don't do it now. In fact, that is an economic loss to the farmers. If I can do what is called the ginning process at the farm gate, I would save a lot of money to the farmers because they probably will get a lot better thing. And in fact, economically, we can also optimize the transportation cost and those kind of things, which we don't do. Just some data on the Indian context and cotton. We are the largest producer of cotton in the world. Till 2015, it was China. Today we are the largest. We have 1/3 of the world land under cotton, 12 million hectares. Though we are the largest producer, our average yield is only 532 kgs per hectare. This is a lint yield. That is actually the fiber yield, not the seed cotton yield. World average is around 1,000 kgs per hectare. China and US are the second and third largest producer of cotton. Their average yield is a lot better. In fact, China doesn't do anything special. As far as yield is concerned, if only we can do things in the right time, we could do much better. In fact, a lot of the farmers in India have more than 2,000 kgs per hectare yield, and we have extremes. But on an average, India is a rain-fed country, and our yield is actually very low, and our investment into technology is very low. It's just that we couldn't follow good agriculture practice. That was the reason. Okay, 50% of the production cost is on picking. That's today it is already gone to 15 rupees per kg. I'll come back to this particular number later. But that is the reason why I am doing harvesting. In fact, I started this company because I couldn't pick my cotton. I lost around 25 hectares, 25 acres of cotton because I couldn't pick in the right time, and there was a heavy rain and lost the whole crop. And just that we didn't get enough people. The point is that the harvesting is a peak time labor problem, and you don't get enough people at the right time. And if you don't get the people, then many a times you lose the crop. The other social impact and economic impact is cotton is the source, the raw material for the whole textile industry. 60 million people are employed in the textile industry, one of the largest employer in the private sector. It's actually a considerable part of the GDP is on textile industry, and it's one of the largest export earner. The other fact is only 20% of the textile fiber used in the world is using cotton, 80% of synthetic. If only our country's average yield goes up, there may be a lot more we can produce. And the rest of the we can actually make a farmer's economy better. 80% is still synthetic, which is not probably the best. Cotton is actually proven to be the best fiber for the human textiles. Where is the world here? If these are some of the commercial and almost ready for commercial solutions in the industry now. The one on the left is called bottom left is called harvest automation. It's a nursery bot. Nurseries are one of the most labor intensive task. It requires moving of the nursed plants from low sunlight to the high sunlight to train the plants towards the high sunlight before you actually plant it in the main field. These machines can actually scout, they can spray, and they can move the pots anywhere to anywhere, and they all work in a cohort, and they also work with humans. They are one of the most expensive machines available in the robotics, in the farm robotics. But they are pretty good. They're around $15,000 each, and they've been there for quite some time now, almost a decade now. The one on the top, the strawberry harvester, is now very commercial. There's a one more version they have now. This is completely autonomous picking for harvesting, and it's a good mission. I think it's very successful in some sense. The yellow one, which is called the sweeper, is the capsicum harvester. This is from the European Union. It came as a university project, and now it's getting commercialized. Though it is with specific constraint. If you see all these three ones I'm talking about, they are all in a constrained environment, more likely in a greenhouse kind of thing. So you probably will really understand how difficult is it to do a mission on this. And they are not very fast. They are actually, though commercial, they are not as efficient as humans, but still they are required. The one on the sweeper it was done last year, and I think now they are commercial. The top one is called the lettuce thinner from Blue River Technologies. I talked about thinning, basically removing of unwanted plants or non-healthy plants and maintaining the plant density. And this is a very difficult task, and especially if you're in a large fields. This is in US, California. This company completely automated it, and the mission actually is now part of Blue River is now part of John Deere. They are an extremely successful product now. And there are quite a lot of others I'm not shown here. There are two companies doing only exclusive apple picking, one in Israel called FF Robotics, and one in US called Abundant. There is a company uh, uh, in uh, uh, in France called Neo, which is doing only pruning. They also have other technologies, and there are quite a few in European Union. And if you see, everybody is doing a very specific task, and that basically says there's a whole lot of challenges and interesting opportunities in this field. So going into the technologies, uh, uh, one is we need three kind of hardware. In fact, two kind of hardware. One is a vision kind of thing for sensing, and the other is actuator. It's essentially the motors for the robotic arm, and what you call as the end effector or the gripper, right? In vision, there are quite a lot of options now. But what I feel is the RGB stereo camera is probably good enough. There is a uh, when I started my company way back in 2014, there was no easily available stereo cameras, especially the RGB. I had gone ahead and built a couple, four versions of it, but today you get really good ones, structured imaging stereo cameras, and a VGA resolution is good enough. Why do you need stereo cameras compared to LiDAR and other high-end technologies? Most of our problem is, especially in the cotton and horticulture, will be that you need a very short range. And not a long. The blind spot cannot be very large. So stereo cameras fit into that, and now there's quite a good set of technologies come. Intel I use actually the Intel RealSense cameras. There are quite others there. Recently, to avoid high reflectivity, we somehow get into solutions like polarizing the images, and I have done that. But now recently, a lot of the camera sensors or image sensors have come with inbuilt polarizer, which you can digitally uh, uh, position the angle, and that's a great thing. And they are definitely used in required in the industrial domain, but I think it's a great thing for even in the agricultural domain. I had to solve this for with a very difficult way by putting a polarizer and everything there. RGB cameras plus LiDAR is probably good for orchard kind of a thing because their LiDARs are high precision and the distance is high. Stereo camera may not give the precision at a larger distance, so you probably want to use it for an orchard where like an apple or orange picking and those kind of things. HSI, hyperspectral imaging, is definitely good, but kind of feel that we probably can do away with it, except for specialized applications, because the advent of deep learning and everything may be good enough to avoid HSI kind of. HSI is a pretty costly solution today. Maybe they will come down, but they are there and they are pretty good if you want to do very signature based, spectral signature based sensing. If you want to do any specific disease or pest detection, maybe HSI is good, but not in a very common parlance, right? On the actuators, we need servos or precise servos in all form factor. We need high torque and form factors. We need very small ones for the end effector. End effectors are the one which actually do the actual picking or whatever task you're doing. We need very small form factor motors. So there are in the robotic world there are what is called a smart servos. They're pretty expensive, and that's how we started uh, uh, building this robots. But as what is happening now is motors like a simple BLDC motor used in the drone can replace the smart servos in all sense because they give you a very high torque with a kind of a smart controller, which is now coming in the industry. We can have a very high precision. I actually get a lot more torque with a very cheap BLDC motor compared to the very high-end servo motors which I had. I started off building a robotic arm almost as in 2015. I had one which cost me 7 lakhs. Today, the same thing is around 60,000 rupees because I replaced some of this BLDs motor. Of course, I did a lot of the things, but the motor is come down a whole lot on the pricing. Going forward, I think this technology called frameless motor is an interesting thing. Companies like Universal Robots had to build their own motors, and because they need a kind of a, they have to shape the arm in a particular way. You can't buy an off-the-shelf motor and do it. So they had to work with a lot of the motor vendors, and they came up with what's called as frameless motor technology. But now it's available for the public; anybody can use. So this will open up a whole lot of interesting uh, robotic arm solutions. So you can shape your arm to any size and size, definitely, and even hollow motors are available for multiple tasks. Um, Frameless motors are nothing but you get rotors and stators independently with your encoder on it. So you can build your arm around that, and that's an exciting thing. We are looking at that. The other important thing which is I feel important is the soft robotic grippers. Soft robotic grippers are basically uh, uh, the kind of end effectors which are made of soft material but can be shaped into any form you want. And there are interesting controllers which can position or move this uh, end effectors for various operations. The challenge is in actually the controls. They are kind of pneumatic kind of devices, but they are proving to become very, very, very good. And I think in the agriculture application, I think there may be a lot more possible because of soft grippers. I'll talk about some of them a little later. Uh, Going forward, the software, there are three definite segments. One is the vision processing, where you start detect, locate, and track. Uh, Typically, we have been using image processing with OpenCV, but what is happening now in the past few years, not very few years, and last year, and so deep learning is becoming so easy to use, and people can build application out of it very quickly, and the compute power is so cheap today. I think real time on the edge. Uh, Location and tracking and detection is possible. In fact, we moved away from, I have built my first detection with OpenCV, and it took quite some time with some faculty members of IASC. But today, within less than 2 months, I moved into a YOLO-based solution, which is doing lot better and at a lot cheaper cost. So I think deep learning is really promising. I think, and the compute power is really exploding. So, in fact, I am running on something like a Raspberry Pi, my complete controller with vision, without any power. Robo manipulation, arm manipulation is one of the important tasks, which is it's more complex if you increase the degrees of freedom of your arm. And So, but though there are a lot of algorithms available, this will be something if you want to be in a real time fast. I'll talk about the one of the challenges is actually the performance. Though there are a lot of technology available, technique, the solution is there, but performance wise, we are still way off from a human picking kind of thing. But fast motion planning, if you can get something really good, it will be great. Today we have a whole lot of algorithms coming from ROS and those kind of open source, but there is a whole lot of learning algorithms being done even in India, like Professor Behera in IIT Kanpur. He has have a trained the arms to do a lot of interesting motion. So many of you may know about that, but I think the the algorithm based thing is moving away to, again, here motion control is also being done by deep learning. Uh, what I feel is we need quite a lot of dynamic motion control with coupled with object tracking to improve the performance. Today, it is for me, it's an open-ended. When I say open, I detect, locate, and then move my arm. But there are a whole lot of issues in that, especially if your crop is moving or the process of you moving the arm will disturb the plant, then you probably will lose your target by the time you do. So you need a very close loop control, and that requires a lot more smart motion planning algorithms, and that is probably the challenge in the robotic arm manipulation. And the last but not the least is the autonomous farm navigation. In fact, I feel that this is one area which, if at all there's an autonomous vehicle, it should be in the farm. It's a lot more valuable there than any other place. But still, it is not so easy because it is not based on GPS. You have to look at the plant and you cannot move fast, and you have to sense the plant and be able to navigate through the farm. Mostly, it is definitely it is a row type plants. Most of the horticulture crops are, but still they are not necessarily straight. So you have to track it, uh, dynamically track it and move. And with dynamic motion tracking and autonomous farm navigation, we can actually really improve improve the performance. But I don't think we are here. The one I showed on Blue River, they had done a great job. They don't have an arm to do anything there, but they do the thinning by some kind of a laser, so they're little bit easier. But if you want to move an arm, that's very tough in a dynamic, fast kind of thing. But I think those are where the research and academic can really help. Uh, the challenges, I would say that I didn't talk much about end effector. End effector is essentially the unit which actually does the task, either picking or pruning and those kind of things. Pruning is actually very difficult if you have to build a pruning end effector. It's very difficult. You need a lot of power to prune, and then you have to push in control. Your pose is probably a big chance. But if you start looking at a different kind of crops, right, you need some haptic sensing. To know the how well you're gripping. And if you look at floriculture, I don't think it's so easy to mechanize any of the operation there because the flowers are. So I feel that soft robotics may be one interesting thing going forward once you get the basic problem solved. And I think that is an application domain where people can work on to do increase the spectrum of robotics in the agriculture. Even rose cutting is not something very easy. You need a very different kind of gripper or end effector. The next important problem is the performance. I have shown a lot of solutions, but I don't think we are coming anywhere close to a human picking rate. Though I, as a Green Robo, I claim that we are picking at at a human picking rate, but it came with a lot of effort, not so easy. Uh, and that is to do with the architecture and the software algorithms and everything. So this is one place where a lot of work has to be done purely from a technology point of view. And I think it will come soon because there is a lot of scope and a lot of work is happening. Many of you in the academics already know much of it. The actual challenge as a product is the robustness of the solution. What is happening is uh, is the solution can be built, but it's great inside a lab. The moment you take it into the field, you have a completely different environment. The plant grow at their own. Uh, they don't have a structure, or there is no constraint on the plant to grow. So you have to adapt to a different kind of plant geometry. In fact, cotton, if you look at it, there are plants which only breeds of cotton which is only 3 feet. There are breeds of cotton which is 6 feet, and for very different reasons, people use all those things. So you have to adapt to all sort of conditions. In fact, our robotic arm has to scan vertically all the way to 6.5 feet to pick a complete plant. That's a big challenge for us. Um, but we have to run. The environment is very dusty. You have an average cotton field will be 34 plus degrees ambient. If you look into the hardware box where the electronics house, it will be 38, 39 very easily. So it's very big challenge, and you have to be running continuously for 10 hours to finish a 1 day harvesting. So this is a very highly reliability and robustness issue, and probably more to do with the mechanical and to some extent the electronics hardware, where robustness is such an important thing. which is not the case in industrial robot where you have a temperature control at least and a dust proofing, which is and your environment is in you are structuring your arm and everything in a closed environment. Power consumption may not be an issue, but I think if you can have a low power solution, it will come give us a long benefit. Definitely, most of what we are doing is electromechanical. You don't want to put a huge generator there and start pumping power, or have an engine to do this. So, though is nothing stops you from doing it, but if you can come up with a low power solution, that is a great thing. And last challenge is actually the economics. Farming, you can build a solution very robust and very efficient solution, but it's not going to be cost effective. The only model I see which will work is pay-per use, and that's probably the only way moving forward, like any other industry. And this is has to be very, very well. If someone is wanting to do anything on farm robotics, this is one of the most critical issue. I had an arm which I started off with 2 lakh, and today I am at 60 plus, 60,000 plus. But I think I'll have to go down below 50,000 to make it anything meaningful for the user. Uh, so what do we have today? I just go back to this cotton thing by showing the cost of cultivation and labor. It takes around 60 man days to do a complete operation on cotton. It's around, most of it is on weeding and picking. Uh, yes, weeding is becoming more and more chemical, but still you need around 50 people if you eliminate the do completely chemical weeding. And from a cost of production, this is the data around 2015. Today, it will be around 20,000 rupees, around 16,000 rupees is what I showed. Half the cost is actually on picking. And the labor requirement is also, peak labor requirement is actually on picking. So, as I mentioned, our average yield is only 532 kgs per hectare. Government is trying to improve the yield to the world's average of 1,000 kgs. That basically means you need suddenly a huge more number of people to do the same job, right? And that's a big challenge. So what do you do? That you have to essentially mechanize some aspects of it, which is what one of that is what I am doing. Right. In fact, if you look at it, the pesticide cost is more than 2,000 rupees, and it's more than the actually the fertilizer nutrient cost today. And it's purely because of inefficiency on how we apply fertilizer. So what is the solution today? John Deere has a great machine, 6610. It does a great job, but then it has its own limitation. And this machine is available, at least a form of a machine like this is available in the past 4 or 5 decades. From the early 50s, the machine mechanization was done in US, but this was never can be adapted to India for all the different reasons here. But one of the prime reason is what we call as synchronous bloom cotton, which requires a lot more chemical inputs and uh, seed. The synchronous cotton gives you almost 1/4 of what a normal multi-bloom cotton. So it is not suitable for Indian condition, even if our land aggregation becomes bigger. So for a small farmer, it is definitely not the case, though John Deere has been trying to work hard to bring in a smaller machine in India. But this one single problem is stopping them from bringing those solutions here. And this is true in China and most of Africa, where the landlots are very small. So what did we do? We came up. I started this company way back in 2014. I had this what you call a single row harvesting machine as a pilot. Some of the work was done with some faculty of IAC and especially on the detection. But this does exactly the same way how human pick. You have the detecting and locating algorithm, and you have an arm which can goes and picks it. Uh, it can pick one arm can around pick around 250 kgs. That's the target. That is 20 bores per minute. That's equivalent to 2+ seconds to pick one cotton ball, and that's pretty big challenge. We can operate in technically we can operate in low light or even the night, which is an important thing from a commercial point of view. So we went ahead and now commercializing it. We call that solution as Pragati. Basically, the three-part to that. One is a Yantra, which is the arm. We use 3D vision with AI and ML. It's only a 3-degree arm, R theta 5. Uh, and we use a mechanical kind of a spindle to dislodge cotton from the cotton shell, and we use air or a wind or a vacuum to transport the cotton into a bin, and that basically means our arm is a hollow arm and air flows through it. We have a vehicle which is what is called a smart multi-arm robo carrier. We can put any number of yantras in there theoretically. And there is a high level software which does some of the management software. So this is uh, uh, the solution we have now. It's actually in the field. We are testing it past a few months there. And this is a self-powered electric vehicle. We can put around 12 arms on this. It's what I'm showing is only the one single arm. This is the actual arm. Uh, we have seven generation of the end effector. The one with the pink or pink color, I think. Violet color is actually the end effector part. We have 7 generation of that, and in fact, it's very. We had to optimize it for all different variation of cotton breed and time duration at which we pick. The early you pick, you have one kind of behavior, and the late picking has a different kind of behavior. So we had done this, and a very important thing, we can do 50 kgs per day, which is actually the human picking rate on an average in the Indian conditions. It is definitely, the value is it's multi-bloom cotton picks, multi-bloom. We use off-the-shelf cameras and off-the-shelf electronic uh, um, SMBs. And we build our own robotic arm, and a lot of it is actually plastic, which is one of the challenge we have. We had to move to something very a different material for temperature and friction kind of issues. Okay, that's all I have. Probably I can show a video. Can you
Yes, we can see it.
see the picture video?
Yes, the video we can see it. Yeah.
Hello?
Yes, Mr. Manohar, we can see the video. You can play it. Hello. Hello, Mr. Manohar. Hello, Mr. Manohar. Am I audible?
Can people see this video?
Yes, Mr. Manohar, we can see it. Hello. Yes, we can see it, sir.
Can people see this video?
Yes, sir,
Yes.
we are able to see.
Okay, I'll just start again from the beginning. So this is just to highlight. It's a little. It's a slow. Uh, what we can do is much faster. This is a little older, but it's just a highlight how it works. And multiple of this arm is actually in the mounted on this, and the arm which you saw in the vehicle is actually a later generation. This is an older generation of our the end effector especially. We actually can pick 20 balls per minute. Uh, the actual picking takes 2 seconds, and that is our target. So this just to show how it works. There is a camera which is You take a snap and detect all the cotton, and then we have an R theta phi moment. That's all it is. The most of the challenge is actually not necessarily in the algorithm, but it's more on the detail engineering. Here what you see is a vacuum pump. We have integrated the vacuum pump as part of the arm itself. There's no more vacuum pump. It's a lot more detail engineering there. We removed that LED and everything out of it. So that's all I have. I'm open to questions. I think there are some 20 more minutes.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that insightful session. So we do have some questions. So we would be going over them one by one. Okay, the first question of the cotton is a big challenge. Is it due to air volume? Is it possible to pack cotton in bags and then remove air by vacuum pump? Will this enhance the transportation capacity?
No, as long as the cotton seed is inside the cotton, if you crush it, it's bad for the cotton because first it will color. It will color the cotton if you crush the seed. Still, the seed will be a little wet or still has moisture. So if you try to pack it tightly, you will essentially crush the seed, and that will discolor the cotton. That's a fundamental issue. You will again bring in fungus and those kind of. Unless you remove the cotton seed, which is basically called the ginning process, you can't do that packing. And that is the reason I said that simple task like ginning could have made a lot of difference.
Thank you, sir. Question is from the very first slide that you are showing and where you mentioned the loss on the cotton. So the question goes like, why should one lose cotton pick due to rain? Can't the plant be cut and stored and later the cotton be removed? So that's the question.
No, no, if I can actually cut and store it, I can as well harvest the cotton. So if you don't have labor to, no, it doesn't. Okay, cotton. What I was talking about is it blooms multiple times, so you don't cut the plant until you are ready to destroy the plant, right? Typically we harvest 3 times during a season within the 60 days of the reproductive phase. So if I have enough people to actually cut the cotton, I can as well harvest the cotton. There's not an issue. So the issue is actually availability of labor, peak time labor. We won't get that because everybody is doing cotton.
Yeah, thank you, sir. The next question is on Raspberry Pi. You did touch upon this while you were mentioning the technologies and software that you had used. The question goes like, can we use Raspberry Pi in agriculture, or predominantly you can throw some light on did you use Raspberry
The
Pi for
compute
your
power we
investigation?
require is actually, if you look at Raspberry Pi 4, actually it has huge compute power. We are running our YOLO 3 with darknet on it, and it's pretty good. There's no issues about it. So I said the compute power is good. In fact, Raspberry Pi is competing with NVIDIA's Nano, which is another, which has a lot of GPU. Raspberry Pi has a A73 4-core processor and a GPU there. If they enable the GPU, it's a small GPU which is not used for a normal GPU operation, it's used for only the VLC encoder. But if you look at all the data, it is as good as for at least some of the application as good as a NVIDIA Nano, which is costing me around $130, I think. Raspberry Pi is around $35. Maybe $50 for a 4 GB version. So you can technically use it. You have to do some kind of optimization. You can't throw in ROS directly onto it. You have to optimize some aspect of ROS and everything so that you best use of all the resources there. Yes, you can.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Uh, what are the challenge tasks in terms of image processing that we can look at from research perspective for which we have some data set, say in the world of cotton industry?
Okay, I would, if you want to look at it, what I have been doing is a 2D image processing. I believe I'm not the best expert on this, but I believe a whole lot of 3D image processing work is happening. If we can use the 3D data, uh, uh, we have 3D sensors now, right? If we can use the 3D data and do some kind of optimal detection location, it will take away some of the challenges I have. I actually do a 2D detection and then index into the point cloud or the 3D data to find the location. If I can do a lot better detection on a 3D space, it will be great. In fact, I was talking about the pruning. Uh, Pruning of vineyard is a pretty difficult challenge because it's very difficult to find the branches in 3D space. You will find the 2D location, but you don't know what is the 3D location. So keeping your arm in the right pose and trying to flip the branches which you want to prune is a difficult challenge. So if you have a better algorithm in 3D space to detect branches, and it will be an extremely good thing. And in fact, that was the reason the company is still not commercial. I think they started much earlier than us, but they are struggling.
Thank you, sir, for that answer. The next question is there any scope for swarm robotics in the field of precision farming? If so, how can we go about employing it for our benefit?
Definitely, yes. In fact, this is the proposal by Professor Glenn Rains and others from Georgia University. Georgia University is building swarm robots for what is called as cotton picking. They feel that the way we are doing what I am trying to do is probably the best thing. There are many other reasons why what we are doing is good. One of that is multi-bloom, but small small missions and working in a swarm is probably a lot more efficient than doing a very big mission. So that is definitely the case, and some researchers are working towards that, definitely. But it's probably not. It's a more of a research. From a commercial point of view, I think it is still some time away. But I think at least in academia, we should look at.
Thank you, sir. The next question is, what is the source of power in general for these platforms? And for motion planning for manipulators, is the challenge mostly because of motion of robot and planning the manipulators to grab the object? Can you throw some light on it?
Power source is essentially a battery. We were thinking of a hybrid uh, thing. So power has to be the battery costs are coming down. So we currently feel we will be able to go forward. But having see, we need to run as long as possible in the field. We can't be swapping out batteries uh, or putting a diesel generator or those kind of power generator along with this, which will increase the cost. So if you can optimize the power, that's good. The second part your the question is, see, there is always a wind, and if you want to increase the performance, you want to pick as you go, as you move, right? So that basically means you have a huge planning, dynamic planning, emotion planning algorithm to work, and it has to be fast. So what in our case we stop, detect, locate, and pick, and then move to the next point. But if I want to improve the performance, I think you have to keep moving at least at a slow space to really improve the productivity of the machines.
Thank you, sir. The next is it to design a gripper?
Okay, it depends on the uh, see the gripper looks. It's like asking how difficult is it to build our arm, but it depends on the actual application. For us, cotton, we don't have an arm. It's just a kind of a roller with some kind of a spindle which runs at a particular RPM and at a particular length and a torque. And the tuning that RPM and the torque and the length was probably our biggest challenge. So it's more a field level issue than purely tech, what I would call is a concept issue. Concept, I think it is easy. In fact, we thought vacuum is good enough. We threw a lot of vacuum on it. Even if you throw a lot of vacuum, you can't still pick because wet cotton you can't do. So it's same problem will be for every different kind of uh, end product. Like if you're going to pick um, a tomato, you probably have a different challenge. If I don't know whether people have harvested brinjal or bendi, you cannot pull it out. You have to pull it in a particular direction and hold it in a particular direction. So these are the gripper may be simple, but the motion for the gripper has to be different, or you have a very high sharp incision knife that will add to the energy requirement. So there's a lot of interesting what is the most critical thing. So typically today we'll go and build something. For a capsicum, you can twist it and pick it, but for a bendy you cannot twist. If you twist it, you will damage the crop. Similarly for brinjal, and so each one of them has own challenge. So, but you have to have some kind of a sensing to hold it, and then there's some kind of a motion to move it. So the motion can be a part of the actual arm, but you need it at the tip. The motion has to be at the tip. So it's a kind of an interesting problem. And if you start looking at picking jasmine, this is one of the biggest problem. We are the largest exporter of jasmine in the world. It's a huge manual task if you see how they pick. Uh, and one of the reason why it's so costly is because of labor, not because we don't get enough jasmine. You have to, in fact, mango we don't pick. How it is picked at one time, just because we don't get labor. If you actually pick it at the right time, it will be a lot more. 40% of our mango is lost because they are not ripe or ripened the right way, and so we can't export. So they're lost. So the right gripper is important. I would say it's a big challenge, and I think there's a lot of work to be done there.
Yeah, thank you, sir. We are almost on top of the hour and we are left more questions. Just wanted to check quickly with you on the time. Is it okay to if we can address few more questions and then
Yeah, go ahead. No problem. No problem.
okay, so the next question is more predominantly on the Pragati and specifically on Yantra. So are there any singularities which occur in Yantra robotic arm since it is a three-dimensional arm? And how do you overcome this problem practically if it occurs? And the follow-up question is, can this technology be used in backyard farming? And will it be economical?
Uh, See, it can be used in backyard farming. It may not be very economical. Okay, the economical. I was just trying to tell you it's around 50,000 plus. We're targeting the cost. So for a backyard farming, maybe not worth it. It's definitely it's costly. Uh, it is more from a commercial farming angle only. So from a singularity point of view, we have this, the arm we have is kind of uh, it's a screw kind of system. It's a triple screw design. There is actually, I believe there is a singularity, but we couldn't prove it. So that is one of our problem we have now. It gets jammed at a particular point. Uh, it's a telescopic mechanism and a triple screw arrangement, right? And the middle one, the last part of the telescopic doesn't rotate, and we had a mechanism to hold it in place. And I think there is actually a singularity point there, and I don't know someone. I still believe, but I don't know how to theoretically prove it or disprove it, and so we are struggling to figure out what is the issue.
Yeah, thank you for that answer, sir. The next question would be, does the arm move over the field by itself, or does it have to be moved by humans along the track between the cotton plants? If it is automatic, like how does it address uneven terrain?
Okay, the arm is mounted on a vehicle. So the vehicle takes it around the field. The operation of the arm is completely autonomous. Basically, you say that you switch it on or enable it. It takes an image and picks whatever is there in the field of view, right? Whatever it detects. But the so it's mounted on the vehicle, which I showed, and multiple of this arm is mounted on the vehicle, and the software called Vistra. Uh, Vistar actually controls the moving the vehicle and the controlling the arm. So it's a higher layer software. So arm is an autonomous thing, but it's controller from a top layer.
Thank you, sir. The next question is predominantly on drones. Are drones in a good solution for precision farming? Is it economically feasible?
I think it is economically feasible. If you take the current context, definitely spraying is becoming more and more costly. I think it is just a time the cost will come. The cost of a drone will come down. It's only the payload which was a problem. I think the payload is coming, it's going up, and I think technically there is solutions. It's just that government has to enable it. The regulatory body is the one which is a challenge now, more from a security reason than anything else. So we can do a lot more precision spraying if I can enable the drone. Uh, and a lot better. I think human spraying is definitely hazardous to a human, and it is a very hugely involves drudgery. So if you, it's becoming more and more costly to from a human point of view. So it's purely if I get a solution, it will be there. In fact, there are a lot of commercial companies actually have solution, but they are not legally commercial because of the government regulation.
Thank you, sir. The next question is predominantly on precision agriculture. So I'd be combined that we have. Will the precision agriculture be suitable for small scale farmers? And uh, the next question would be, so can you provide some tips for precision agriculture for coconut
Okay.
farming? Yeah.
Yeah, I got it. There is nothing. If the, in fact, the example of cotton picking we are doing, I am the cost of picking for my mission, if I use in a rental model, will be 8 rupees per kg. Today, a small farmer or any farmer is spending more close to 10 rupees. In fact, Maharashtra, apparently, I hear it is crossed that 14 to 15 rupees, and that third picking people are not even doing it. So, if the model is a paper use or rental model, then I don't see anything wrong with a small farmer using. In fact, none of this mission, no farmer should own it. They should be using it in a rental model. So that is a precise way of. So small farmer is fine. Today, if you look at paddy farmers, they all rent it. Nobody owns this kind of missions. It's so there's nothing which says that a small farmer cannot use it. Uh, in fact, if they employ manual labor, you don't have a labor, and it's still going to be costly. All we are saying is we are helping the farmers' productivity to increase. See, today, if you look at it, I have around 15 acres of land. I can't put even 5 acres of cotton because I know I will not get labor. But even though I know cotton is a great crop in my area, and it gets a lot better income compared to a paddy or any other similar crop. In fact, to double or triple the paddy's income, I can get in cotton, but I can't do it because I know I'll not get labor. So nothing stops you. Nothing as if the model is a paper use model, it's fine for even small farmers. I forgot the second part of the question. What was the second part of the question?
No, some tips for using precision for coconut, precision agriculture for coconut farming.
Yeah, I think this is one of the biggest challenge. Harvesting of coconut is still a big challenge. A lot of people who have built the machines which will go up to the top, but then picking precisely is very difficult. So you need a lot more intelligence there. I think that's a big challenge. Getting a mission all the way up is easy. I think it's a solved. A lot of people have found missions to go up, but exactly cutting and taking away the because it is between the leaves there, right, or the palms there. So how do you reach out, and then you need a very high reach arm, and then you have to pick it out and throw it. So it's not it's a challenge. I think a lot of people are working on it. Definitely, if we have some great ideas, it's something we have to do. It's one of the biggest challenge. Just not coconut, even areca nut. Areca nut is a lot more commercial crop than coconut. We still don't have problem solutions. In fact, spraying of areca nut is a big challenge. More so because you don't have people who can go up the areca nut. As even coconut, you many people can be trained, but not an areca nut. So yes, the solution and the challenges are similar.
Thank you, sir. And during the course of the presentation, you also mentioned that 80% of fertilizer sprayed is waste and only 20% is useful. So can you suggest a robotic solution supported by AI and ML for controlled spraying of fertilizers?
Yeah, I think see the biggest challenge is where do you want to spray? If you can identify the pest in an early stage, uh, or you can become pest in an early stage, then it is the best thing to do. Especially, I have one pest called mealy bug. If you identify the time of the egg laying stage, you can destroy them very quickly. But once the bug comes out, it's very difficult. Much of the pesticide doesn't work. So identification of the pest is probably the most important thing, and then you need to have a very high precision spraying. Some of the you might have multiple pests, so you might want to use a variable rate sprayer or those kind of things we have to do. In fact, there is a company in Bangalore who is doing specifically for cotton, spraying for cotton. It's a well-founded company. You can look it up. Company name is Tata and Sons, who's doing spraying for cotton, and they have a AI-based solution for identifying and locating the pest or whatever symptom it is. It need not be. It can be also a disease.
Thank you so much, sir, for patiently answering to all the queries that our participants asked. So as we have come up to the Q&A session, I would now request Dr. Sudarshan, Professor CSE and Dean Research, PS University, to propose the vote of thanks for today's session. So, Dr. Sudarshan.
Yeah, thank you. On behalf of IEEE Bangalore section and IEEE RAS Bangalore chapter, I would like to thank Manohar for accepting our invitation and delivering this insightful talk on precision agriculture as an essential application of robotics. We have been interacting with Manohar since the inception of IEEE RAS Bangalore chapter and seen the amount of passion he has for this particular area. I'm sure all of us have immensely benefited from this particular talk. Thank you, Manohar, for all your support extended to IEEE RAS Bangalore chapter. And and I also would like to say that this is the third webinar in this particular series from IEEE RAS Bangalore chapter. I thank all the participants for attending this and other webinars as well, and also asking such interesting questions. IEEE RAS Bangalore chapter has a few more talks being planned in coming weeks. We'll send out the information very soon, and we look forward for all your participation in our future endeavors. You can visit our website for more updates. I also thank Chengappa for hosting and arranging this particular session. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. In fact, I wanted to thank PES. My first prototype was completely built by the PES student. I don't know if you know that. My first set of employees I picked 6 interns from PES, and they subsequently became my employees, and now most of them are abroad doing the PhDs or MS on vision and robotics. But thanks to them for my first prototype. It was all built by the students.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. So we would be wrapping up the session for today. And please follow IEEE Bangalore section for more such details on the webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you all.